Today's learning target is, I can use the law of cosine to find a missing side or angle in any triangle. Now, the law of cosine is here. C squared equals the sum of the square of b and a minus 2 times a times b times the cosine of c, when c and angle c are directly opposite of each other in the triangle. If I was going to find angle c, then I would want to make sure that the b and the a are the two sides that are adjacent to angle c. Just so you know, if I wasn't going to find angle c or side length c, I could modify the law of cosine, and I could set it up so I could find angle a or side length a, which is this one right down below. Or I could modify and find angle b or side length b using this modification. The most important part when we set up the law of cosine is that the side length and the angle in which I'm using to find one or the other need to be directly opposite of each other in our formula. Remember, the two side lengths that I square and add and the two side lengths that I multiply by -2 in the cosine of c have to be adjacent to the angle. Let's go ahead and take a look at the application. So in this problem, what we're going to do is use the law of cosine when I'm given two side lengths at an angle. The interesting part for this one is that this is almost like a side angle side scenario, where I have a side length 52 and 16 that are adjacent to the angle that's provided. Now the key is that if I'm going to solve for x, the angle that I have provided has to be directly across from the side length in which I'm trying to find. Let me show you how I can use that law to help support this. I would put x squared on the left-hand side of this equation. Remember, on the very far right, the angle measure on which I'm multiplying by the cosine has to be 115 because they're directly opposite of each other. Then what I would do is fill in the 52 and the 16 here and here, which are the two side lengths adjacent to 115, and I would fill them in here and here. And then the rest is order of operations. Let me show you some techniques for solving. I would first square and add the two adjacent side lengths, 52 and 16, to get 2960. Then what I would do is multiply -2 times 52 times 16 times the cosine of 115 right in my calculator. And because the product was positive, I would put a plus, and I would put 703.236785. Now, then I would add those two quantities together to get approximately 3,663.2367, which would equal our x squared. Now, in order to find x, I would have to do the inverse of x squared, and I would have to take the square root of both sides, resulting in an answer of approximately 60.52 for the side length here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the application from when we would solve to find an angle measure. Okay, so when we would use the law of cosine to find an angle measure, we still want to make sure that our angle that we're trying to find is directly across from a side length that we know. Just so you know, if you were going to find the angle of any triangle, you would at least need to have all three side lengths provided. So in this scenario, I have all three side lengths of a triangle provided, and I want to find the angle. Now, because I'm going to try to find angle x, and remember I could find either of these other angles, but we're going to find angle x today, x is directly across from side length 24. So that means when I think about the angle and its opposite side, remember when I plug them into the law of cosine, they have to be on opposite sides of the equation. So what I would do is do 24 squared, which is right here, and I would make sure I put cosine of x, which is the angle we're trying to find, on the very far right-hand side. Now, if this is the angle I'm trying to find, I still want to put 32 and 37, the two adjacent sides to the angle. I still want to put them in here and here. And once I do that, I'm going to use order of operations to solve. I would do 24 squared, which is 576. I would square the two adjacent legs, 32 and 37 and add them together to get 2,393. And just like before, I would multiply -2 times the two adjacent legs, but instead of multiplying by the cosine of x, since that's what we're solving for, I'm just going to multiply these three numbers together. And because the product is negative, I would write -2,368 times the cosine of x. Now this just looks like a standard equation, and we're going to use the inverse to solve. So I'm going to subtract 2,393 on both sides, and then simplify. Then what I'm going to do is divide by -2,368 on both sides. And then at the very end, I'm going to simplify my fraction, and it's going to result in this decimal. Now this decimal isn't the angle measure. Remember, anytime I use a trig ratio, I'm going to put that decimal equivalence into the inverse cosine function. So on your calculator, you would do inverse cosine, which is second in the cosine button. Then you would plug in that decimal equivalence to get your approximate angle of 39.87 degrees.